I just got done trimming out the majority of the windows on my tiny house, but I have 2 more to trim out, and those have arched tops. So that's going to add a little extra difficulty to the project. So in this video, I'm going to go through all the steps that I take to get that same style, but with an arched top. Let's go have a closer look at the window to see what we're working with. Here's a closer look at the trim on the rest of the house, and it was a simple picture frame style with a 2-inch inner part and then a 1-inch thick, and it stuck off 2.5 inches was that outer band you see. And if you'd like to see a video on that trim work, you can check that out on my channel. Those windows were the stained glass windows I'll be trimming out in this video. To keep the video moving along pretty quick, I went ahead and made the inner part of the trim work. This is the part that will go flat against the wall, and then the curved part that goes around it will stand out from its edge. And this is made out of 3 pieces, 1, 2, 3, and joined with biscuits. You can see the connection on the 2 right there. And the goal was just to make the wood as long as possible, the grain run as long as possible through each one of those pieces. So let's get it smoothed out on the disc sander and the spindle sander. A disc sander works really good for cleaning the outside radiuses of a wooden curve, and for the inside I used a oscillating spindle sander, which moves up and down to keep the paper more clog free, but you can use one of those erasers when you need to take out the sawdust it builds up. For the outer part of the trim, I'm going to do a bent lamination, which consists of a lot of strips of wood bent over a form and glued together, and they retain their shape once the glue sets. And that's me making the form. It's OSB and 2x4 spacers. I put together another video on this process if you'd like to see it. Next up was ripping strips of wood that would then be bent around the form. They were a little under 1/8 of an inch. And you just want to put glue on them and then clamp them all firmly and as evenly as possible around the form. Once the glue was dry, I cleaned up one side of this bend on the joiner and then took it over to the table saw and ripped the other side parallel. You just want to be careful doing this that you keep it firmly against the fence and table and keep your hands clear of danger. To clean up the outside, I used a belt sander and then the spindle sander to clean up the inside. With my bent lamination made and the inner piece also done, it's now time to start fitting it to the window frame. So I've popped on the hinges because that's what I have to work around on the window, and now I need to cut here to make a joint between the arched inner piece of the trim and the vertical part of the inner trim. So this I'm just going to pretty much eye up, and then I will fit the vertical part to the angle that I cut here. This cut can easily be made on the miter saw, but can also be made with a handsaw, and perhaps that would even be a slightly safer version. You just want to make sure that the piece is firmly supported on the backstop of your miter saw. Next up was just getting that piece clamped in place and measuring for that vertical part of that inner trim, which is mitered on its lower corner. And then the opposite side is the same, and for speed I'll just lay that one right on top of it and then just cut it to match. Let's take these over to the window. Alright, so all we need to do now is we are going to measure from the outside of one to the outside of the other. It looks like 19 5/16. Then we're going to add a 16th to that, which makes it 19 3/8. And that gives just a little bit of leeway to where our hinges aren't rubbing right on the trim work. And here is that piece being test fitted into place. So the final step that we can do here on the workmate is cutting this outer piece of trim where it'll connect to its vertical piece. The rest of it will all be done when the window is actually mounted, when I cut that vertical piece and then the horizontal piece at the bottom. So right now we need to decide where we want to make this cut. And I'd like it if it was pretty much the same on both sides, so I think I'm going to use the bottom of the hinge as my reference mark. Doing this type of work can be pretty fun because you're constantly having to sort of problem solve because you're not working with straight boards, 90 degrees and everything, so it really is sort of a
make it up as you go, and you'll have to forgive me for not having the safety glasses on just then. It is easy to forget to put them on. But there's the curve placed over that inner trim work.
With the outer arch all complete and the inner done, it's time to go mount the window back in the house, get the inner trim mounted, and then we'll fit the arch to it and then complete the rest of that trim. So let's go ahead and head up to the house.
An unanticipated problem with fooling with these windows was that when these windows open, that they can bind on the trim. So I solved that problem by routing a profile into the inner and outer part of the trim. It was a cove bit and a rabbiting bit on the lower part, the inner part of the trim, and then a chamfer on the outer. Then I connected that outer part of the trim to the inner because I wouldn't be able to access it due to limited space in the gable. I then took that part and then nailed it to the house above the window. Then I just went ahead and got all the inner parts of the trim in place with the nail gun. And I was pretty impatient. I didn't want to wait till the next day to get the trim work in, so I went ahead and worked into the darkness. But I still think it makes for a good enough picture quality for the video.
Okay, so here's a daytime closer look at the trim. We've got the outer bent lamination, the inner part, 3 parts biscuited together. Had to route those profiles in them where it was binding up on the window. Didn't really anticipate that, forgot about that. And then continued that, that routed profile down that vertical part of the trim. And ended up with a little gap in there. The dimensions changed a little bit when I was shifting around the arch at the top. But you can see there where the router, I just kind of stopped the router right at it, transitioned to that lower strip, got a couple nails sticking out. I'll punch those in and spackle those holes up, and then I will caulk all the seams so it'll all be nice and seamless in the end, and then receive its paint job. And down at the bottom, I want to explain this real quick. This part right here has a downsloping 2-degree angle on it, and then this lower piece of trim, so that creates a slope to where water will run off. Then I also ripped a 2-degree angle onto this edge of this board too, to where you end up with a nice flush side. So that just creates a better look and sheds the water also. So now let's get it caulked and painted.
I used a gray DAP caulking and then some spackling to fill in any cracks and rough spots in the trim work, and that makes for a much smoother paint job. And the paint I used is an Olympic solid stain. It's called Gibraltar Gray. And for more on this topic, you can see the other video that I did, the window trim. I speak more on it. And here it is all completed. It's 2 coats, 2 thin coats of the solid stain, and then a backed off shot of sort of all the windows together.
Well, that wraps up today's project. I hope you were pleased with the results. I really liked that unexpected routing of that inner trim part, and the chamfer on that outer part I think turned out really nice. As I said, wasn't expected, but that's the kind of things that happen when you don't have this concrete plan. You get to work and you find a problem, and then you create an answer to that problem, and oftentimes it is better than the original solution that you were aiming at. And that's why I like building stuff, because it's happy surprises all the time. So with all that said, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
To follow this project and more, click the red subscribe button now, and you will be updated when I post future videos.